Hello, and welcome to another episode of Dojo Live this Thursday, April 6th, 2023. My name is Kim Lantis, and it's my pleasure, as usual, to be co hosting along with America Guerrero today. Hi, America.
Hello, everybody. We're wearing a uniform today.
Yeah, similar. I'm all about the stripes. I'm all about the stripes. I love it. That was not planned.
I didn't get the memo. So
Mahesh, our guest of honor today, did not get the memo. Sorry, Mahesh. Next time you join us on the show, we'll be able to tip you off on what that uniform is to look like. Everyone listening, we're really excited to be talking with Mahesh Baxi today, who's the co-founder and CEO of Provus. Mahesh, thank you so much for joining us today.
thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Yes, it's going to be a really great conversation as we dive again into artificial intelligence. It's been all over the place. It's not going to be going anywhere, but it's always fun to see the different applications. And today it's about services quoting. But before we get into those details, we would really like to know your story, your passion, and sort of what's led up to the co-founding of Provus. Please share.
Wow, that itself could take many hours, but I'll try to shorten it. First of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's great and great pleasure. Looking forward to the conversation. I've been in the industry, IT industry, close to 30 years now, and a good part of my professional life I've spent in the domain called code to cash. Right, and my code to cash journey started back in 2001. Started that journey with a company which was dealing with enterprise contract lifecycle management. Then I worked for a company which was into pricing optimization. And then I was the first employee of a company called Aptus, which was a category defining when it comes to code to cash for the product companies. And I led customer success and professional services for Aptus. And as things progressed, not only we defined that code to cash category, but actually we solved a really complex, problems for the enterprises, right? The mid market to enterprises when it comes to the product CPQ, and basically taking that entire cycle, as it's called, code to cash, and how do you configure your product, how do you basically price your product, and then basically go through the proposal motion and then invoicing, billing, all of that kind of stuff. Now, the funny thing is, while running professional services and customer success for Aptus, I was doing my entire business on Excel spreadsheets, Word documents, and email approvals, right? So here is a product CPQ company. We are selling our solution to the customers, but to enable those solutions, enable our product for our customers, we would do the entire business on Excel spreadsheet from a services standpoint. Right. Phenomenal journey, fantastic outcome. And then when I came out of Aptus, me and one of my co-founders, Stavan, we were chatting about, what's next for us. And Stavan's background is basically just like how I have been on the product side and running customer success, professional services. I've been an entrepreneur myself. I've done engineering, product, so I've been more of a generalist. Stavan actually spent all of his professional life working for large services companies such as Infosys, Edison, Larsen and Toubro, and so on and so forth. And so we were chatting and we were like, what's next for us? And we were going through a variety of different ideas, and obviously the deep industry domain background when it comes to quote to cash finally came down to, hey, you have been spending your entire life in services. I've been a customer success leader. And look around, while there are product CPQ companies out there, there is nothing that actually solves the same problem when it comes to services, right? And so that's how the idea of Provus was born. But hey, every founder likes to think that the idea that they have is a fantastic one, and so we didn't want to just like, okay, let's do that. We actually spoke to about 30 different companies of different size and different industries, and 96% of those responses said we do our entire services business on Excel spreadsheets. And that includes companies which are big fives, I don't want to name them, companies which are mid-tier, companies that are SMB. And it was just absolutely encouraging for us to see that response, right? And so that basically was like our aha moment, like, hey, our backgrounds and our domain is so relevant. And look at this, while companies such as Aptus and Salesforce created the product CPQ space and quote to cash space for the product companies, there wasn't any really credible solution that would cater to mid-market to enterprises when it comes to services quoting. So that's how we actually started services quoting. It's a 2-year plus journey now, amazing journey. We'll talk more about the journey, but extremely well funded. We did 2 rounds of funding. We have paid customers now. Amazing product that caters to enterprises, and absolutely happy customers that we have right now.
I love it. Congratulations. And for me, I think one of my biggest takeaways, I've got a couple takeaways just from your story. And the first one that intrigues me is the what's next question. I think that speaks very well to your character and people like you, that entrepreneurial spirit that most people I don't think have. Like, I don't think we have that ability or just that need to ask that question. I think it's a really, really great question. And then, of course, always your introspection of looking at what do I know, what do you know, what makes sense. And then we've seen this a lot on Dojo Live, the market fit, right? Is there a need? And then you established it, and here you are, 2 years in, but it sounds like super successful. So let's talk specifically to Provus. Now we know it's a services quoting tool, but how does it work exactly? What's the problem? You highlighted the problem, but how does it work? What's the problem that you're solving here, getting folks away from Excel?
Yeah. So
didn't hear this.
let's dive deeper into that. Yeah, I mean, Excel is a great tool, right? I mean, everyone at some point in time starts doing everything on Excel spreadsheets, and there's nothing wrong with it. Excel gives you a great deal of flexibility and easy way to get started. But as you grow, as things progresses, as you have more people, more processes, it just doesn't scale, and then you end up living with Excel spreadsheets just because maybe there is no credible alternative like Provus that you haven't come across, or maybe you are emotionally attached to Excel spreadsheets, and we have run across those customers too. They're like, hey, I started working on these Excel spreadsheets, and now it's 18 different tabs and 1 mile long Excel spreadsheets, and I'm kind of married to it, right?
Or the inability to ask what's next, right? Like, we get comfortable. It's what we know.
Exactly. So, but what we do, Kim, is really, if you think of a different industry segments, right? So we cater to a lot of different industry segments. To name a few, we go after what we call the professional services industry segment. And then I'll talk about the other industries. But to explain what exactly we do is, if you think of a professional services company such as Salesforce, such as Aptus, where we had a product, but we had services arm to enable the implementation of that product for our customers to start the adoption journey. Because when it comes to any product companies, especially SaaS product companies, it's all about how quickly and effectively you enable your customers to use your product, right? So now when you are providing that professional services for the product that you are selling, how do you know what's the scope? How do you know how much it's going to cost, right? Just because your product is you're selling at $1 million doesn't necessarily mean that your service is $500,000, right? It could be 100K, it could be 1.5 million, depending on what the scope is. Now this is where the slippery slope in today's world, how most of these companies do an Excel spreadsheet starts, which is, to even figure out whether it's a $500,000 services or $1 million services, you have to start the process with the sales team. And sales teams are not necessarily delivery experts, but they typically know what are the 5-10 high level questions that I need to ask so that I can get into the ballpark, right? And maybe the ballpark gets you between 400 and 600K. But as and if that fits the need of the customers, then customer will say, okay, I need to know the exact scope, I need to know how much it's going to cost, I need to know what are the resources, what is the timeline, all of that stuff. And typically it's a mess when you do all of these things on an Excel spreadsheet, which is where Provus comes in. So what we do is, once you start your opportunity and you are at a stage where you know what you're selling, but now you need to also figure out what is the services component. Provus basically automates that entire process right from the scope discovery that the salesperson people are doing, to go through all of the details of how many approval processes do you have, how many templates do you have, how many instances you have, what are you trying to automate, what are the integration points, right? Or anything and everything that affects what we call the scope, which is the foundation of any services that you are providing, right? So we actually help capture the foundation, which is the scope, through what we call our estimator. Now, great. I mean, now you have a consistent way that every salesperson and every delivery person is answering those questions in a systematic format, and now you have something which is what we call the rough order of magnitude. Now, if that looks great, then they start the journey into what we call the quoting life cycle. Right, the quote is basically, you can call it SOW, you can call it proposal, but at the end of the day, you have to provide a commercial a document to a customer, which basically states what's the scope of the work, what are the resources that you are going to have, how long it's going to take, where these resources are going to work from, what's the price, in all that stuff. So we actually have an end-to-end process where in the quoting life cycle, you generate your baseline quote, and you can actually generate a very professional looking SOW or proposal document that you can put in front of the customer. Now, all of that sounds still great, and that's something that we automate. But guess what? I mean, no customer is like eager saying that, okay, give me your document and I'm ready to sign on the dotted line. It doesn't work like that. That's where the more messiness, in today's process, Excel-based process comes in, which is what, the main pain point that we solve, which is customer will come back and say, well, this looks great, but, I don't have a $500,000 budget. I can only spend 400K. Right? What do you do? Well, what you do is, I can give you 20% discount and get to 400K. Great. But services business is all about how do you maximize your revenue, and most importantly, how do you optimize your margins? Because unlike the product CPQ, services business is all about how do you maximize your revenue and optimize your margin. And so when you are going to give that 20% discount, you are actually underselling all of your highly sellable resources, right? Because you have project managers and solution architects, and all of those resources are highly sellable, because maybe you have 100 other deals going on, and maybe you can sell or do those deals at a $300 an hour. Why do you want to give them at $200 an hour on this deal? But in Excel spreadsheets, you never have those visibility. The second messy thing that starts with Excel is, to cater to customers' needs, what do? You start copying Excel spreadsheet as version 2, version 3, version 4, version 5. One of our customers actually told us that they have 55 different versions of Excel spreadsheets by the time they're done with the negotiation, right? So all of that is something that we do as part of our product. We completely automate the entire services quoting life cycle, right from your scoping all the way till your SOW or proposal is approved and signed.
Wow. So it sounds to me like it's not just about maximizing revenue, but also minimizing risk. I mean, if we're talking about 55 different versions of something, and several hands in the pot, right? I imagine that there's occasions where what I thought the quote was and what you thought the quote was, and ends up not being the same thing. And then you have to spend time and resources to figure out that mess as well. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And currently we are built on Salesforce, natively built on Salesforce platform. In this process, we actually fill the gap, the white space, which sits between your sales opportunity life cycle and your back-end invoicing, billing, and project management processes, right? So we actually sit right in the middle. We integrate with your upfront, front end sales opportunity systems such as Salesforce Sales Cloud, or NetSuite CRM, or any other CRM. And on the back end, we actually integrate with any of the leading PSA tools such as Mavenlink and Kimball and NetSuite. And in fact, NetSuite, we are partners with NetSuite, and that enables the entire lead to cash motion for your services, which is the missing piece today in all of the enterprises when it comes to process transformation.
Really beautiful. It seems to me that we actually have a question come in from a viewer.
Antonio, I have it here. Antonio Suna. Hello, do you live? Loving the uniform. Mahesh, is your product easy to integrate with ERP and CRM systems, and how does this impact your clients' operations?
Antonio, that's a great question. Thank you so much for asking that question. Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, as you can imagine, in the services quoting automation, you are almost always going to initiate this process from your CRM because, all of these companies and customers that we are talking about would have automated their sales cloud, which is where the opportunity starts, right? Now, from this opportunity, in fact, what we have built and what we allow customers to do is if you're a salesperson, you may not have in-depth knowledge of what are the different kinds of services that we should include as part of our offering to the customers. And these days, the services business is only getting more and more complex and complicated in terms of different kinds of things that you have to do on back of really doing a process transformation for your customers, which means that, hey, is it okay if I just give you implementation services, or should I include managed services, support services, education services, and content services? Well, if I'm a great salesperson, I might include all of them. If not, I'm like, okay, I don't know, let me just go with implementation services and see where it goes. So in the CRM itself, not only that we integrate, but we have AI led recommendation engine which looks at your historic data and say, okay, for this kind of customer, for this kind of industry, you have been able to successfully not only sell implementation services, but you have been able to sell other types of services. And here is the recommendation for you to include all of those services. Now, some of those services could be package services. Some of those services could be custom services, which is where you have to go through the entire scoping and estimation and all that stuff, right? But all of that can be initiated through opportunity, which is where the tight integration with CRM comes in. But as you go along, you can hand off the detailed part of your discovery and scoping to the delivery teams, because the sales teams may not want to get involved in the detailed discovery. But as the delivery teams are working through the proposal, we actually keep that tight integration with opportunity so that your forecast is accurate through the process. Now, once you go through that entire process of the quoting life cycle in our system, we actually integrate with, like I talked about, NetSuite or PSA tools, right? We integrate with those tools to make sure that you have visibility into what's coming through the pipe. You can actually automatically create your project object with all of the resources, the work breakdown structure, and everything that you have negotiated with the customers. And all you have to start doing in your ERP or the PSA systems is start allocating those resources, and those resources, as the project progresses, will just start assigning the timesheets and stuff like that, right? And I'll talk about what we do from there on as we go along. But the answer to answer Antonio's question, absolutely. I mean, we almost always integrate with front end CRM systems and the back end fulfillment systems of sorts.
Nice. And I think this is a really great segue into what was coming next in my question, because the topic that you chose, of course, is the future of service quoting and using AI to maximize revenue, which I think we've already touched on quite a bit. And the simplification, right? How service companies can simplify selling with AI and automation. So let's talk a bit more to the AI piece. You mentioned there's the AI component that can tip people off in histories, right? With client types or deal types, and what perhaps to offer and things like that. How else are you utilizing AI with this, or the automation component?
That's a great question. So multiple ways. So the one example I talked about is, hey, right at the front end of my sales process, our AI engine is telling you what are the services that you are better off selling. And not only what are the services that you should include in your proposal, but based on all of your historic data and our modeling that we have done, it tells you what are your chances of successfully selling these services. So that's just one example that we talked about. Let's talk about the second example. Now, what happens is, in a complex mid-market to enterprise environments, your deal is a fairly complex affair, which means that it's going to be a multi-year deal, which means that it's going to probably have 50, 60, 70, 100 resources. Those resources could have different resource mix. Those resource mix can come from different locations. And all of that may have many different factors, including the productivity, the utilization, and how your entire structure for that deal is going to be. Now, with Provus, not only that you can do your baseline creation of a multi-year deals, but where AI comes in is, it's like, hey, customer, like the example we were talking about earlier, hey, it's a $10 million deal, but customer, wants to do it for 9 million, right? That's the budget that they have. Now, again, we talked about discounting, but where our AI comes in is AI actually looks at all of that data, which is the multidimensional aspect of what we deal with, which is your scope, your resources, your productivity, your resource locations, resource mix, where these resources are located, all of that stuff, and basically come back and say, you can ask the system saying that, hey, what can I do for 9 million? I have a budget of 9 million, which is the revenue seek goal that you're looking for. System will look at all of these multi dimensions and give you a scenario which is basically closer to 9 million, and say, here is what you should do in terms of scope, here is the resource mix, here is the locations of those resources, and it automatically maximizes your revenue potential, which is getting closer to 9 million. But it
Mhm.
actually helps you optimize your margins by analyzing all of that data. And this
So
is
it's
this
not
is
just
like
giving you a discount, it's helping you to better utilize the resources that you have
The
and
exactly.
operations.
to rearrange the entire proposal.
Exactly.
Like
And
if you
which
want
is
9 million, I'm not just going to give you a 10% discount. We can do this instead.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
It totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Continue. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt
Yeah.
you. Or America, I think you do have a question as well.
No, I'm just thinking that it, with AI, I'm just thinking that replacing, for example, the um, with that help, you're kind of replacing the operations team to see if that is possible, right? So I'm curious how companies, when they hire this kind of services, are ready to accept that this kind of technology is going to replace the operation system team. Sorry, I
Yeah.
don't know. Uh-huh.
Well, yeah. So the way we like to, what we have seen and the way we like to put it, America, is really, we are not replacing operations team. We are actually enabling them to make faster, better, and efficient decisions. Right? Because again, it's not, the intent is not to replace operations team. I think they are doing amazing job. It's a very, very intense job when it comes to this multi-year deals and how you structure the deals and stuff like that. So I don't think any system can really replace the operations, but what systems like Provus do is to really enable them. Because imagine the operations person going through 50 different Excel spreadsheets and different modeling and trying to figure out the head and tail of what the deal, how the deal should be structured, and it's an error prone mechanism. You are going to miss out on a lot of things. But here we actually allow you to say, okay, here are the different scenarios. The decision still has to be made by operations person or
Of
the
course.
CXO or whoever has to make, but at least we give them all of the analysis that otherwise just is not possible on Excel spreadsheet based
Is,
systems.
is this analysis also available in tandem to other deals in process? Like you've mentioned resources several times. My assumption is by the word resource, we're actually talking about individuals, right? The people who will
Yes.
be implementing these services, software developers,
Yeah.
whatever it
Yeah.
might be. And so let's say we've got, 10 deals in the pipeline and we're talking through things. And we know that, like you had mentioned, $300 an hour versus 200 or whatever. Is it able to get that granular and talk about individuals and resources and who you might have in the pool, who you might have on the bench, what you've got coming in the pipeline, and help you say that, prospect A is going to be in your best interest versus prospect B, focus on this one? I mean, how does that look with all of these moving components, right? Oh no, that resource has now been assigned to a client. We've got to rework this. Like,
Yeah. That's a great question, Kim. One of my favorites. So I talked about our integration with the PSA tools, right? Which is where the allocation of those resources for those projects happen. So now this is another place where we actually, bring all of that data back and do several things. The couple of things that I want to mention is, at the deal level, you would be able to analyze and say, okay, for a particular deal, if you need a project manager and a solution architect, and let's say 25 developers and 15 quality engineers and stuff like that, or any kind of resources for that matter, depending on whether you are a consulting services company, asset-based services company, a transportation logistics services company, or pharmaceutical company, right? Any of those services, this is applicable, which is, I want to know, I'm positioning the deal to start, let's say, from 1st of May. But, do I even have resources available, right? Do I want to commit to 1st of May start date, right? And you don't want to wait till the deal is sold and then go back to the customer and say, oops, sorry, right? So that's one part. But then if I'm a CXO, or if I'm heading a region, for a particular company, I want to know what are all of the deals in play, right? And what kind of resources that we are ready to commit, and what kind of margins and scenarios are being played out. Because deal by deal, absolutely, you got it. But for a decision maker, hey, I have 25 deals in play. I don't have resources. Which are the deals that I should delay? Which are the deals where I should push for higher margins? Which are the deals where it just doesn't make sense for us to do it right now? So that's also where the AI comes in, and basically helps you, saying that, hey, here are all the 25 deals, and here is how you would rate it, how you would risk it, here is where the availability is, here is where you can push the margins, and so on and so forth.
It makes a lot of sense. And particularly as most companies, as we grow and we get more and more global, and there's different business units where you're in some ways, I think, working individually, but at the same time wanting to be able to take advantage and work, more unified. It makes a lot of sense. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes, your journey, the service that you're providing. I'm curious. We're in the final minutes of the show, so the last question will be: what are your words of wisdom? You said that, for example, for those who want to start this entrepreneurial journey, what would you recommend them? Because you said that it's not just having a great idea; it's to see what's next. What else could you share?
Yeah, I think words of wisdom is multifold, right? One is, I think, the early validation of your idea is important, right? I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs have a lot of ideas, and I think all the ideas are great. But at the same time, if you want to build a business on those ideas, then I think early validations with the customers is important. And in that regard, it's not just the validation, but the key question is, would you pay for this, and how much would you pay for this, right? And usually we shy away from those questions, but those are really important questions early on to ask, because the idea may be great, your solution may be great, but if customers don't see themselves paying for these solutions, then you're not going to be able to build the business around it. I think the second word of wisdom is really, I think, especially if you're doing a B2B enterprise solution like ours, right? I'm not speaking for B2C and some of the other domains. I'm not expert at that. But when you are solving a complex business problem for enterprises, I think the domain knowledge is absolute paramount, right? And so as a founder, as a founding team, as you are building your early team members, I think it's extremely critical to keep in mind that it's everything revolves around the domain, especially when you deal with enterprises. And domain is how you establish your thought leadership. Domain is how you establish your credibility with your customers. Domain is how you get them to talk to you and take you seriously. But if you don't have any of those, then it's just yet another solution, which is more of a technical solution, and you don't really have meaningful conversations with these enterprises early on, right? So that would be my second word of wisdom.
That's really smart. I'm curious, you as an individual, how do you keep up with your domain knowledge? Like, what might be some of your routines, your go-to sources? What has worked for you to become experts, other than just living life and hard knocks and whatever that might be? But do you have any methods or anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think, I mean, at some point in time, you have to get started. Like 20 years ago, 21 years ago, I started with the code to cash, not knowing that this will become code to cash. But once you do, I think the number one source of inspiration is your customers, right? Once you start talking to the customers and prospect, and if you're really good at listening, I think they are the primary source of inspiration. That's something that we encourage everyone in our teams to listen to the customers, attend the demos, all that stuff, right? Because they are living and breathing that problem day in day out, and that's what we are trying to solve for. So they give you a lot of insights. The second is really, when it comes to code to cash, for example, there are so many good leaders out there, and thanks to platforms like yourselves, there are so many podcasts, there are so many places where you can go and read about that or listen to that and all that stuff. So that's another source. And the third is really, as you are implementing your solution, trying to see what's around it and what are the problems that business processes are, kind of facing, and what can you do about those business processes. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the customers, it's all about the users, and making that entire process transformation easy for these users and customers. And so if you keep that in mind, I think the domain and the solution starts to kind of trickle in terms of what's the right path forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Mahesh, your words of wisdom, introducing your very cool platform and tooling with us. I think it makes a lot of sense as companies get bigger, as companies get more global. And I think this is another case where it's just helping people do their jobs better, to be able to do more with less, and not have to fear some of these bandwidth issues, or even having to limit yourselves on what types of companies you might and want to be doing business with, because you've got a tool to help a lot with that analysis. It's absolutely fantastic. We wish you and Provus nothing but success. 2 years in, here's to 2 and 20 more. Good luck to you for sure.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Stick around for just a moment as we go off air. But before we do go off air, we'd like to remind our viewers that we do not have, it's Thursday, so no Friday shows on the regular, but we do have our recap show next week. We'll talk about Mahesh's show as well as Chris's show yesterday, give you our thoughts on that, and share what we've got coming up the week following as well. Be sure to follow us, dojo.live, and check out all of our shows, 500 plus, really great ones like Mahesh's and more on the site. All right, thank you all, and have a great rest of your day and a great holiday weekend. Bye for now.
Thanks so much.